Hello, everybody. It is April 4th, 2026, here in the United States of America. I hope everyone out there has a wonderful Easter tomorrow and is having a great Lazarus Saturday. I hope everyone gets to spend time with their families, gets to attend church services if they're able, whether you are Roman Catholic or Protestant. I hope everyone out there has a wonderful Easter and Christ is risen. Now, I am an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and we don't celebrate our Easter until next Sunday, but most people I know celebrate Easter on the Western calendar. Most people I know outside of my parish, like my family, my wife's family, and most of my friends and whatnot, celebrate Easter on the Western calendar. So, have a happy Easter to all of you. I have another week to go, another week of fasting. This Lent has been especially difficult this year, much more difficult than it has in the last few years, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost there, just 1 week left to go. I'm really looking forward to Pascha this year. I always really love our Pascha services. They're a few hours long. It goes until about 1 a.m, but it's a wonderful service. So anyone out there who's curious about an Eastern Orthodox Easter service, I would recommend attending one. Now, if it's your first Orthodox service, just to warn you, it is going to be very, very long. About 3 hours in total, but it's well worth it. It's a very wonderful and beautiful service. But anyways, so let's get into the topic of this video, and this is going to be a short one. I'm not going to speak on the war with Iran. Currently, I know several aircraft have been shot down, an F-15, an A-10, and 2 Black Hawks have been damaged, but I don't have much more information on this. There's a lot of misinformation on X about what's actually happening. Pro-Iranian accounts are saying the losses are much worse than what they are. You have CENTCOM and pro-American accounts, disputing things Iran is claiming, and then, is footage AI generated? Some of it's a little too grainy to make out. I'm going to wait until there's more information available before I make any kind of further analysis on this war. I think I'll let things develop for another week or two before I make another video on it. But in this video, I'd like to talk about how President Trump's lack of political acumen and the fact that he's not a politician is actually really catching up to him now and really hurting him in ways that I think if he were an experienced politician and understood PR a little bit better, he could probably improve his position in the polls. And that what used to be his greatest strength, and not being PC and not being a politician and saying whatever's on his mind, is now ended up as his greatest weakness. And because he's in a very delicate and complicated political situation, this is something that he either needs to take good advice on or something he needs to learn to be a bit better at. So back in 2016, one of the things that made President Trump so appealing was his lack of political correctness, his ability to just kind of say whatever's on his mind, to be very straightforward and honest about things in America, things that politicians would often dance around and give pre-planned, canned answers for. President Trump was a breath of fresh air, especially after Barack Obama. Obama, while initially had a broad appeal because of his well-spoken way of articulate. He was very articulate, very well-spoken. He seemed genuine at first, and it seemed like somebody who was going to make real change in America, like a breath of fresh air, so to speak. Well, it turns out many people found out that, Barack Obama was simply just a politician like any other, just a little more well-spoken. But he wasn't the guy to come in and make sweeping changes to the system. And then somebody else comes along talking about how, yes, everyone uses tax loopholes. I use them too. You're being taken advantage of. I know because I use the system. Talking about putting politicians in jail, really holding people accountable, draining the swamp, tearing the whole system down. And this was a real breath of fresh air for the American populace. We're very frustrated with our political system and have been for quite some time. We wanted somebody to really come in and make sweeping changes, to actually champion the average American, to say what was on all of our minds, to stop giving out PC, pre-planned, boring answers, and actually shoot from the hip, so to speak. Sound like a real person And this was very appealing in 2016. A lot of people got on board the Trump train, so to speak, after the first couple of debates and after listening to President Trump, now President Trump, talk about things in a way that most Americans have not heard a politician speak in their lifetimes. And that was before he got in office. But now that President Trump is in office, especially now in his second term, his lack of political acumen and this tendency he has to just speak from the hip and say whatever's on his mind and give out red meat to his base, I think is actually hurting him. Especially now that the United States is currently involved in a war that is proving very unpopular with the American people and very unpopular in Trump's base. It's causing fuel prices to rise. It's causing a great deal of anxiety across the country that this could turn into a much larger, wider war. There doesn't seem to be a clear off-ramp yet. The messaging on this war is very mixed from Trump's side. One day he says, well, we're in the process of negotiating. Right now, Iran wants to make a deal. This war is going to be over in a matter of weeks. Iran's military has been completely annihilated, that objectives have been achieved, and then the next day you seem to get another statement that contradicts everything said the day before, and it's causing a lot of confusion and discomfort in his base. Now, Trump went into 2024 with a massive coalition. He won the popular vote, pretty decisively. He won swing states very decisively for a reason. Trump carried a lot of disaffected Democrats, anti-war progressives. He had a lot of populists on his side, and of course, the red meat Republicans that are super pro-Israel. And this was a coalition that President Trump needed to remain intact into the midterms in 2026. And Trump's messaging and actions have actually, I would say, destroyed this coalition. You had people that wanted full transparency with the Epstein files. They didn't get it. Now there's rising energy costs because of this war, a war that, I'm just going to be honest here, the only ones who really support this military action with Iran, and I'm just, again, being straightforward, are Zionist Christians, like pro-Israel Christians, conservative, pro-Zionist Jews, and the Iranian diaspora. These are the three groups that chiefly support this war, and this did not make up the majority of Trump's coalition. This was not enough to actually, I would say, carry the popular votes. You had quite a few people that voted for Trump because he was supposed to avoid this exact kind of scenario, that Trump was supposed to hire professionals that did their best to avoid the set of circumstances we find ourselves in now. And Trump's messaging on this, and this is what I'm going to cite specifically, and this is actually what got me to, inspired me to make this video, was an interview that President Trump had done several days ago at the White House, where he talked about how Americans are not actually concerned about paying $4 a gallon in gas. They're just happy the Iranian regime is gone. Here's the issue. If Trump was astute politically, he would know that that was probably the worst thing he could have said in that moment. That yes, indeed, Americans, including many of his own fervent supporters, are extremely concerned about $4 a gallon gas. Most Americans outside of, again, these three groups that support this war are more concerned about paying for expensive gas than they are about some kind of civilizational conflict with Iran. And President Trump has seemed to have taken one action after another that has hurt him politically more than it should have. And I'm sure that people around him, especially J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, who are, I think, much more astute politicians than Trump, even though they didn't have the kind of appeal that Trump had, I'm sure understand what's happening behind the scenes, and I'm sure are greatly concerned because they're the ticket for 2028. If President Trump sinks his own ship now by not understanding what to say and when to say it, well, then it hurts their political careers in the future. President Trump should not have said anything about the price of gas. Or Americans not being concerned about it at all. He should acknowledge that concern. He should say, again, speak with this understanding that what he says does affect his voters, and that acting as if he's not concerned about them paying $4 a gallon in gas when this is one of the greatest concerns that Americans have right now, again, makes it look, and he's not thinking of this when he's saying it, but it makes President Trump look like he is completely beholden to the interests of a foreign power in the war that they want. It makes him look like he's completely disconnected from the American people. Energy costs have gone up tremendously. Gas prices are spiking. Food prices have not gone down. President Trump, I'm not sure if he's being put into a very small bubble by close advisors, and he actually believes the things that he's saying. He's being given information that he believes to be true, but the reality on the ground is that Americans are very frustrated by rising costs and rising prices, that these fuel prices going up have hurt Americans, myself included. Gas has become significantly more expensive for me. Natural gas is definitely going to keep going up. It went up last year. I paid, just as an example, $450 for one gas bill for 1 month, when the same amount of gas I used last year cost me $250. It doubled in price. Now, it's definitely not going to go down now. It's just going to keep going up. And this notion that I'm just relieved that Iran isn't going to get a nuke, and that's what really mattered to me. Again, like, if you had any kind of understanding of politics, any kind of ability to read the room, you would know that well, that's just not true, and that's probably not the messaging you'd want to put out. Again, like, Trump's inexperience as a politician was endearing in 2026 and 2016, and very helpful to him then, because it gave him broad appeal. But this lack of understanding of how to maneuver within the coalition that he had to keep it together, this lack of understanding that everything that he says can have very detrimental effects on the entire Republican establishment, especially if he seems aloof and crass and ignorant to the complaints and concerns of his own voting base, just to keep people like Mark Levin and Laura Loomer happy. I'm sure they love the red meat. They're clapping like seals every time he says something tough about Iran, where the average person probably fits in more with, I would say, a Joe Kent or Tucker Carlson, where their main concern is not losing American lives and not having extremely high energy costs. And there's plenty of Americans that feel that Trump doesn't really care or is completely disconnected from, I would say, the concerns of your average American, and his inability to understand that or grasp that is going to crush the Republican Party in 2026. Another thing he said was, too, well, we have a war to pay for. We can't pay for things like Medicare and health care and other costs that Americans are demanding be lowered because we have to fight this war with Iran. But again, if you had any kind of understanding of politics, that was probably the worst thing he could have said, because this notion that President Trump is beholden to a foreign power and its interests over all else seemingly gets confirmed by a statement like that his top concern, and this is what it communicates, is paying for this war with Iran. It's not the American people. It's spending on the military and fighting this war is his top concern, and he's not willing or even able to pay for anything else. I mean, that's what it communicates. Again, it's just feeding into this constant frustration with Trump amongst his base. And when you go on social media, you have plenty of people that say, "Oh, well, Trump's base is not actually mad at him. These are a bunch of panicans." I don't know what that word means, but it's stupid. These are a bunch of frustrated liberals who are trying to make Trump look bad. This isn't actually how his base feels. I hate to break it to these people, and Matt Walsh even said it too. When you go out into the real world and you talk about this war, you get the same response. Yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't want to pay $5 a gallon for gas. That is what the average working class American says. Okay, get these activists out of the picture. Get them out of the White House, get real Americans, and then tell President Trump, this is how we feel. You need to change course now, or you're going to lose us in the midterms. We have no option. And I think Americans are tired of voting for an option just because it's the only one. They want real options. They want real change. They don't want to just constantly hold their nose and vote for Republicans because the alternative is worse. I think people are willing to stay home in 2026 to make a statement out of frustration. And this is a very easy situation to avoid. Again, if President Trump and some of the people around him were better at political messaging, were a little more concerned, I guess, with what people actually think, rather than just saying whatever Trump feels like saying at the time. There's consequences to his words, especially now with this coalition fracturing. He needs to be very careful about what he does and what he says if he wants to hold this coalition together. His messaging needs to be more responsible, a little more compassionate, a little more understanding, and a little more grounded and realistic, I think. But anyways, that's really all I wanted to talk about in this video. Again, this is just my analysis of the situation. I'm sure people out there disagree and they love what Trump is saying, but let's be honest here. Enough people don't like it to where it has endangered the Republicans in the midterms. And no matter how many influencers or pundits beg Americans to come to the come out to the polls and vote, there's no guarantee if this continues that they're going to. This might be a protest, sit out to punish the Republican Party for their inability to fulfill promises. And Trump's messaging right now is something I think fueling this fire. Whether he likes it or not, it's just the truth. Whether hardcore Trump supporters want to hear this or not, it's just the truth. Okay, you might disagree with it, but it is true. I promise you it's true. Anyways, if everyone out there enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to my channel, drop me a like, leave a comment. I'd like to start doing some more content. I'd like to do some analysis, actually, some analysis of the war. I downloaded OBS finally, so I can screen share stuff. But I would like to do some, in-depth analysis on the war in Iran, the ongoing war in Ukraine. I think that's pretty fun, actually. I'd like to get into that more. I'm just not really sure how to fit that in here. I'm trying to balance political analysis that I like to do and I find enjoying with stuff that I would also like to do too, but I want the channel to be something coherent, not something that's just kind of all over the place with videos about random things that aren't connected together. Anyways, it's a work in progress, but I hope everyone out there has a fantastic week. As I mentioned before early in the video, I hope everyone out there has a wonderful Easter. And to all of you fellow Orthodox Christians out there, I hope you have a fantastic Holy Week. I don't know how much content I'll be producing over Holy Week, but I'll try. And I hope everyone out there has a fantastic Pascha next Sunday. Until next time, have a good one.